One of the questions that we frequently get during base camp is about competencies, learning outcomes, learning objectives, and goals, and any other number of different terms that are sometimes used interchangeably to describe what student learning should look like. When you begin to think about course organization and how to teach to the required course competencies, you will start thinking about your learning objectives. But when we start mapping out lessons, these differences can be confusing. So let's clarify the terms that we use here at Chandler Gilbert Community College and what they mean to us as a CTLA when we talk about them. As I go through them, it may be helpful to think of them like nesting dolls to understand how they fit together. Program learning outcomes are defined by district-wide instructional councils as the knowledge, skills, and dispositions that students should attain by completing a designated program of study. District curriculum processes align courses to program learning outcomes, so the set of competencies in any course contributes to the program learning outcomes. Each individual course instructor's primary responsibility is meeting course competencies, which contribute to program learning outcomes. Next, we have course competencies, which are also defined by district-wide instructional councils, and they map out the learning students should attain by the end of the course. Unless you're brand new at Maricopa, I believe everyone understands what the course competencies are. They are the requirements that we are expected to meet as part of teaching that course for our district. We need to make sure that we're teaching to all of those course competencies. Often, these will be really general, and you will want to break them down into more specific learning objectives. So, learning objectives are going to be those specific statements based on your course competencies. They will define learning outcomes or goals and focus your teaching. They help to clarify, organize, and prioritize learning. Don't forget that they should still be aligned with your required course competencies. At Chandler Gilbert, we use the term learning outcomes to describe the general education student learning outcomes assessment. These learning outcomes that a student should gain proficiency in throughout their educational journey at CGCC and include critical thinking, information literacy, oral communications, and personal development. Student Learning Outcomes Assessment describes our process of measuring these learning outcomes, not just in our own course, but across all courses within a specific discipline. An example might be when all English 101 instructors give a similar assessment measuring critical thinking. Something else that I want you to think about when we examine our course competencies and write our learning objectives is to really focus on those Bloom's verbs. Learning objectives should be measurable, but they should also be in alignment with the level of learning indicated by the Bloom's verbs in the course competencies. What do we mean by that? Well, take for example a course competency that uses the verb evaluation. Evaluation is higher up on Bloom's pyramid of learning, which means it is requiring a higher level of learning than, let's say, identify. Identify would be lower on our Bloom's pyramid of learning. So if the competency calls for evaluation, but our assessment of that competency is only using identification, then we are not meeting the requirements of that competency for the course we are teaching. We sometimes observe this in an intro class going the other direction, such as Intro to Communications or Intro to Psychology. In these courses, we're usually hitting briefly on a lot of different topics, and so it's usually a lower level of learning that is required. Routinely assessing at higher levels in these courses may put undue burden on students or set them up for unfavorable learning outcomes. So, as you begin to work on lesson planning and designing assessments, I recommend that you take a step back and review those course competencies again to be sure that you are meeting the appropriate level of learning that is required.